Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Cover Letters and Thank You Notes Made Simple. My name is Adam Mayer, and I'm the Director of Career Development in the Center for Career Services here at Montclair State University. Today, we'll cover the ins and outs of cover letter writing and thank you notes. Due to increased automation in the job search, many speculate that cover letters in particular are on the way out. This remains to be seen, so we'll still need to be prepared to craft a cover letter. Thank you notes, on the other hand, are always in style. Why? Because good manners count. Those of you out there, students, current students who are interested in campus to career credit, the webinar that you are attending will be able to gauge your participation. So if you do log off at some point or go to a different website, that will be something we can see, just as an FYI. You will have the opportunity to submit questions by typing them into the question pane of the control panel. You can send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these and address them as time permits. So let's begin. So I realize this image might be a little bit startling. It's an old school camera, but I think it has relevance in regard to this presentation. So your cover letter is twofold. It's a snapshot, one, of how well you can write. And if we look at the National Association of Colleges and Employers, what they look for in applicants and what they look for on resumes are good writers, writing skill. So that's important. The second part of this snapshot, your cover letter, is reflective of your sincerity. So how much you're really interested in a position. And we'll look at ways to really kind of almost ingratiate yourself with an employer by way of how you write and what you write about. So that having been said, let's open up the first poll. So let's see. So according to the National Association of Workforce Development Professionals, what percentage of executives said cover letters are important when evaluating job candidates? I can see your participation out there. Well, we got a couple smart folks, smarty pants. Let's see. There you go. Some people are still clocking in. So again, what's the percentage of executives that said cover letters are important? That looks pretty good. Okay, it looks like most of you guys got the right answer. So 86% of employers, executives had said cover letters are important. So makes sense. Okay, well done. So we know that they're important. 86% of executives think they are. So let's move forward. First, you want to start with the job description. Now, this is a job description I took from Indeed.com, and I've gone ahead and highlighted some of the features I want to reflect on when I do write eventually the cover letter. So one of the key things right off the bat is to include obviously the job title. I know with this position, posting content, having successful campaigns, data collection, the type of degree, social media experience, and so on. So I just do this almost as kind of a cheat sheet for myself to assist when I do eventually write the cover letter. So what we'll do now is start to look at the cover letter itself. It works on 4 paragraphs, and let's start with the first. So the salutation is where you address your reader right in the beginning. We've got a couple examples here. The first says, to whom it may concern, and uses a comma. This one is pretty cheesy. It's lame. Most folks don't use this anymore. It's very outdated. Aside from the kind of lame way it's put out there, they're also using a comma, which many readers in a professional setting might see as too casual. The second salutation is reasonable. Dear Human Resources, and they use a colon. It's very straightforward. It's professional, and the punctuation is appropriate. The third example, Dear Mr. Plaka, colon. Now with this, oftentimes we don't get a name in a job posting. We'll typically have to apply through an employer's website, but every once in a while, an individual's name will be in the job posting. So in this case, we're assuming this person's first name was a male's name. That's why we're using Mr. The fourth example. Now Jordan could be either a man or a woman, right? So in that case, we're not going to use Mr. or Ms. or otherwise. We're going to use the person's entire name. So in this case, Dear Jordan Bleeks, colon. So that's your salutation. And again, if you guys have questions during this, by all means, type them in. We will address them. So moving forward, looking at paragraph 1, you want to identify the job title and where you found it. So the first thing right off the bat, I'm writing to apply for the, boom, job title. Insert it right there. In this case, social media coordinator, as listed on, and again, this is the source. Employers post positions in a lot of different areas, and they pay money. So they want to identify which sources are paying off for them. Incidentally, many of us might be aware of this, but some folks use an objective on their resume. Now this is seen as outdated, so you may not want to use one if you are, and we can see here in paragraph 1 that that first sentence is basically your objective. It's brief and to the point. Okay, so that's paragraph 1. Now paragraph 2, yes?
Can I cut you off for a second? We have a question.
Please. Okay, great.
Going back to salutations,
okay.
We do have a question about what would be considered too personal. And one of our listeners would like to know whether or not using a full name would be considered too personal.
Well, it would depend on the full name. The fourth example there, when we're not sure of the individual's gender, I would use the full name. But if I didn't have a relationship with them, I would use either Mr. or Ms. and then their last name and a colon. So, and maybe overall to kind of answer that one is, you know, this is all about being professional, right? So if we don't have a relationship with someone, we want to be fairly conservative, straightforward, and move forward from there. Other questions, maybe?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chrissy. So going back to paragraph 2, this one you could see I've been a little obnoxious. It's all caps, exclamation point. I really want to drive this home. Paragraph 2 is about that sincerity piece, the snapshot of you. How much do you really care about applying for this position and hopefully earning this position? So paragraph 2 is not about us as job seekers. Who's it about? And I'm not playing Blue's Clues here. I don't want you to like yell out, all that kind of stuff. My thing is paragraph 2 is about the employer. So we want to research them and reveal your knowledge. The interesting approach here is that paragraph 2 is, like we're saying, is about the employer, and we talk about the employer before we talk about ourselves and our needs. My experience in looking at cover letters over the years is most folks talk about themselves. You know, this is a perfect match for me. You know, I'm a wonderful candidate. You know, all this kind of stuff, and it's like, well, that may be the case, but let's have a conversation. And the conversation starts with talking about with them. So we could see in that first paragraph there, having visited both your website and LinkedIn profile, I realize, and we've inserted the employer's name, main area of impact revolve, you see it here. So what you want to do is, yeah, if they're on LinkedIn, look at their news feed. What types of things are they posting? Are there themes? Are there patterns in what they're posting? You can always make it even easier on yourself and just check out the employer's mission, their vision, their upcoming events, whatever it is, and again, reflect on that in paragraph 2. This is where, again, we ingratiate ourselves with the employer by revealing our knowledge. So that's paragraph 2. We're halfway there. Paragraph 3. Now this is finally about us as job seekers. What you want to do is highlight the skills that you have that you believe the employer needs. So based on having read through this, knowing what we have, we want to reflect on that. So the position requires a big picture mindset, an orientation I employed while managing both a part-time job and the academic requirements of a Bachelor of Arts in Communication, and so on. So again, this is where we shine a light on ourselves, because the job search is about being assertive. And in the end, earning a position is about competition. So my point with paragraph 3 overall is, I'm not saying in any way that we have to be humble. We want to put our best foot forward and put our best experience and our best work out there. So again, paragraph 2 is about them. Paragraph 3 is about us and how we can help. Moving forward. And you're almost done. 4 paragraphs, that's it. And maybe overall the cover letter is kind of like a handshake to your resume. It helps to introduce your resume. It sets the tone. So with paragraph 4, you want to close and provide contact information. There's lots of ways to do this. In this example, it would depend on somebody's schedule, but I'm able to interview at your convenience. If you feel a match exists, certainly we can give them our contact information. What's nice about Edward's email address is it's branded to his name. And then what's going on down here? Most of us know that this is LinkedIn. This is what's called your public profile address. Now, when you first create your LinkedIn profile address, it's this long, all the way out here. It's letters, it's numbers, and it's not branded very well. What you want to go do is get into LinkedIn, and on the right-hand side of your profile, click Edit Profile Address. That's when you can go in there, get the numbers out of there, and then you could brand it to your name. So that having been said, let's open up our next poll and see what you guys have to say with that. This is where we're going to look at where should you place your LinkedIn public profile address. So again, take a look. Participation is cool. You're supposed to participate. This is a good time, I hope. So again, the question is, where should you place your LinkedIn public profile address? I can see that some of the folks are voting here, right? You know, it's crazy on this side. I can see how many, the percentage of you folks. Okay, cool. So it looks like you guys got it right for the most part. 82% of you said all of the above. So yes, email signature, in your resume header, in your cover letter, we can see that here, your networking business card, and then certainly, yeah, all of the above. Well done. You got the right answer. So let's move forward and kind of compare what it is that we've done. So on top, we've got the job description and what we highlighted in the beginning so that we could then help ourselves write an effective cover letter. At the bottom, we can see each of the 4 paragraphs. So within the first 2 alone, we've hit 5 of the items we intended to. The 3rd paragraph, we've hit 6 items that we intended to. So here too, there's like a quick thing. What most folks will do if they say they customize their cover letter, they'll insert the employer name and just change it up each time if it's appropriate. I think that's cool and I think that's helpful, but it's not enough. Overall, typically if we look at mid to large size companies, on average, I've seen some different things. About 118 people apply for every 1 position. Again, this is corporate, bigger picture stuff. So with all those folks applying, we got to stand out. And how can we do it? Again, doing one of these customized cover letters. I've seen it work for a number of different people. So that's about it on the cover letter. If there are questions, by all means, let us know. And then I think we'll move on to the thank you note. So.
Sorry, Adam, we do have a question coming in.
Cool, thank you.
Should we look up the name for the salutation to make the cover letter more personal in paragraph 1?
It makes sense, but it depends on the size of the organization. You might find somebody you can look them up on LinkedIn or their website. If it's an employer that's provincial, meaning fairly small, it's got one location, I might use that individual name if I could dig it up. But other than that, if you've got a multinational employer locations all over the place, they're going to have different HR folks, different different names for different locations. So we might not be able to nail that. So again, in summary, if it's a small employer and you can really kind of nail the location down to the posting, and then maybe the HR manager could be somebody called talent acquisition, I might be tempted to use that name and use that research. But the opposite side, if it's a biggie and a large employer, I might not be tempted to use a name for fear it might not be the right one.
Thank you. We do have another question.
Cool.
In your opinion, is having a LinkedIn profile a must?
Absolutely. At this stage of the game, it's the premier job search networking site out there. So do I need one in freshman year? Not necessarily. Sophomore year, probably not. But if I'm looking into internships and I want to look and see what other MSU alumni have done and what current students are doing with their internships, their full-time jobs, I'm getting on there big time. Junior year for sure. Senior year, it's a must. We do see the number of alumni that sign up for, once they graduate in May, we see a big spike, a couple thousand in the LinkedIn profile for Montclair State every graduating year. My thought would be get on there sooner, because employers, without getting too crazy, what was it? One of the websites indicated that 93% of employers, if they're interested in our application, will be Googling us. And if they do, and we have a LinkedIn profile, that shows up on the first page of Google results. And that's professional. That's the best way to go about it. You can research schools, you can research job titles of alumni, you can have a job tab where you indicate that you're open to recruiters contacting you for opportunities that might be appropriate. We could go on and on. LinkedIn is tremendous. It's a very powerful site. And all the things I've mentioned are part of the free version of LinkedIn. I'm not talking about the premium, the pay version. So I would get on there, sure.
Thanks, Adam.
All right, thanks, Chrissy. So moving forward with the thank you, you typically want to send a thank you within 24 to 48 hours after the interview. And I bring up a weird question here, paper versus email. You might think I've gone batty over here, but you want to ask during the interview this question: what's the next step in this process? What we're trying to find out with that question is, how soon is a second interview going to come up, or how soon might an offer be made for the position? So if the employer says, well, we're continuing to interview individuals, the second round of interviews will come up within the next month, then you got a lot of time. So you might want to get, maybe, what's the word I'm thinking of? It escapes me. Whatever it is, if you use paper and you type up, you write a nice letter, you put it on good high rag content paper that you get like, Office or Staples, the Office Max or Staples, that's interesting, because most folks, everybody, it's an email. Most folks do not get a paper-based thank you. Now, it takes a few days, right? So if the hiring decision or second interview is way out, like we said, a month from now, something like that, a couple weeks, snail mail could be an interesting way to stand out. Now, if they say, yeah, we plan to make the hiring decision within the next day or two, then obviously we're going to send what? Our thank you is going to be via email, just because time is of the essence. The next thing, in terms of your thank you, you want to individualize your thank you notes. So when you send them, say, in this case, via email, certainly you want to get business cards from everybody during the interview. If you've met with multiple people, send multiple individualized thank you notes. I realize it's an extra step, but to send like a mass thank you email is, well, again, we're trying to seem sincere here. And if we really are, we'll take the time to mail individual thank yous to each person. Now, do they have to be drastically different? No. But can you draw something about the conversation you had with an individual into the thank you note? Yes, that's highly recommended. So in the interview itself, there's another question we want to ask, and this is the key to the thank you note. This is the strategy. So in addition to asking what's the next step in this process, you do want to ask, what qualities will the successful candidate possess? So in that case, whatever it is that that employer says, and incidentally, is it cool to take notes during a job interview? Yes, you want to take notes. So whatever they share, if you possess those qualities, you want to reflect on them in the follow-up thank you note, because they just gave you the keys to the Lamborghini right there. Again, we want to determine the qualities. If we possess them, we reflect on them in the thank you note. If there are key points in your interview, you want to summarize those as well. Again, we'll look at an actual thank you. They're not that long, but we really kind of want to get to these parts in particular. This one is interesting. Provide any additional information to support your case. Now, I've seen a few job seekers who didn't answer questions during the interview in what they thought was the best way. So what they've done in the thank you, they reflected on what they thought a better answer would be to that question. Now that's a judgment call. Some folks might see that as Monday morning quarterback. Look, I wish I knew what I was doing on Monday or Sunday, right? And I'm kind of backpedaling, but some people, they're comfortable with saying, I did have a different answer that I'd like to share with you with regard to, and then reflect on it there. So let's take a look. Somebody's knocking at my door. I'll tell them we're right in the middle of a webinar. So let's see. There's a screenshot of a thank you note. We can see the individual's email at the top, the subject, we've got thank you, and the job title, so the recipient knows what. You know, this is a thank you note, and this is the position it was for. And again, we're sticking fairly conservative here, right? Dear Ms. Belushi, and there's a colon. Now, see what's been bolded? I'm not recommending you do that. I'm only doing that so that we can see some of the key points that you can highlight as you craft this sort of note. So we want to include the job title. We know that's key. We mentioned the employer's name directly, so this thank you note goes to no one but JT Media. And we found out something in our research, or maybe during the interview, that this employer is considering, or they're recently expanding into electronic devices. Okay, so this relates to that question. Remember, what qualities will the successful candidate possess? And we know it's somebody who focuses on the big picture and the daily post, and then we back it up by saying, I've done that. I can do that for you. I can provide the combination you seek. Maybe there was another question in there that the job seeker asked the employer, describe the office environment. We know it was progressive. Again, we're reflecting back on what occurred during the interview and then sharing that with the employer. They know we were engaged. So that's about it. I'm trying to think, maybe, okay, we do have one final poll, and I know you cannot wait to participate. So let's start that final poll, and then we'll begin to take final questions. So this poll, according to Vault.com, what percentage of job seekers send thank you notes? I can see you guys weighing in here. So again, according to Vault.com, what percentage of job seekers send thank you notes? Okay, interesting. You guys, well, the majority did not get this. So 28%, 80% of you guys said that only 28% of job seekers sent those out. Okay. So the answer is, let's see, 55%. 55% of job seekers send thank you notes. So with that, I think, that's something you want to consider. If you're interested in the position, you definitely want to send one. Even if you become uninterested in the position, you at least thank them for your time, and for their time, I should say. So, okay, sounds good. So let's open it up. If anybody has any final questions, thoughts they'd like to put out there for today.
We do have some questions coming in.
Okay.
There is a question related to LinkedIn, and I know this is going back a little bit into our discussion,
It's
but
okay.
there's a question about when would you feel the need to invest in the premium version of LinkedIn?
It's a good question. I would first take advantage of all of what's free and see, just trying to be frugal with the job search and see how long that lasts. The cool thing about the premium version, aside from getting, a job analysis between your competition and yourself, some very specific salary information for positions posted. I think in some cases they have InMail where you can email somebody who you're not connected to. The cool thing about that version is it's a month-to-month thing. So maybe you use it for a couple months, you eventually get a position, and then you can just close out the account. So it's not as if you have to subscribe for a year and then maybe you get a job in a couple months and you're still paying for it. So it's a month-to-month subscription, and anybody I've talked to who has used it, they've only had good things to say about the paid version.
Great, thank you. We have an interesting question here. One of our listeners would like to know, how different is the cover letter process from writing statements of purpose for graduate programs?
I think they're different in a couple ways. With the graduate program, we want to customize it just like a cover letter, but the way to customize it is I would reflect on the courses, the core courses that are required for that graduate program. So I would mention them by name. So something like this: if I were to be accepted into this program, I'm excited by the possibility of taking, and then insert some of the course titles. I would customize it even further if I was comfortable and maybe look up some faculty members who are part of that program and look at their areas of research, and I might reflect on those areas of research. So they're similar in that you want to customize them. In the case of the graduate application letter, we want to mention courses that are specific to that institution, and if we can dig deeper and find out areas of research for faculty in that program, I would mention that too.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of thank you notes,
Mm-hmm.
One of our users have previously heard that it's a good idea to add a personal comment on the thank you note if during your interview something was brought up from, on a personal level. So,
Sure.
For example, congratulations on your engagement, enjoy your weekend at your lake house, anything like that. What's your take on adding those personal comments in your thank you note?
I love it. I love it. I think it's a great way to step further into not only that working relationship, but recognizing somebody as a person, who has a social life outside of work. If somebody has shared that with me, and I think it's appropriate. I remember at one point I interviewed for a position years ago, and the individual said something about he was going to a Metro Star soccer game that evening. And I mentioned at the very end, I hope you enjoy the game tonight, and your team takes home a W, something like that. Yeah, I like that.
Great. Now going back to LinkedIn,
Mm-hmm.
would you recommend connecting with an interviewer on LinkedIn after an interview? And what about if you got the job versus you did not get the job?
That's a tricky one. Now, I've heard some folks in HR, again, human resources or talent acquisition, they've dug up the right name, and the individual might be part of that interview process. Some folks in HR do not like that. They find it presumptuous, maybe a little too forward. This is a personal judgment call. It depends on the field itself. Something that's related to sales, sometimes you can be a little bit more straightforward and, it depends, maybe aggressive in that account, but typically speaking, I'm not going to send a connection request to somebody who's interviewing me. If I do, hopefully get the position, at that point I might send a personal note as a connection request, not just one of these canned things. And maybe that's something you guys should consider too. When you send a connection request, when that pop-up box is right there on the page, it's going to say add a personal note. I'm definitely going to recommend that you do. You could have something, save it on your desktop, a little quick post-it note, and just copy and paste it, put the person's name in there. Those are things that, again, make you a person, and rather than the robotic sort of, hey, I want to connect with you on LinkedIn, that kind of thing.
Okay. Now going back to cover letter formats, there has been templates and things like that where the cover letters are actually written in bullet points rather than straight sentences or paragraphs. Would that be the same in terms of professionalism, or is it not preferred to do a cover letter in that format?
Sure. It was a technique that was used years and years ago, and some folks thought it was cheeky, like to have the bullet points in there. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world as long as it's easily readable and doesn't rehash the resume. That's one of the big points we probably didn't talk about. The cover letter should be like the movie, like a trailer to a movie, right? It should introduce us, give us some information, and hopefully, if it's good enough, we want the employer to read through and get to the resume. So we don't want to give everything out on the cover letter, but just enough to attract interest.
Great. And this is also kind of jumping around, but
That's cool.
one of our listeners has had an experience where an HR rep has reached out to set up a time for a phone interview, but when this person called, they did not respond and they didn't connect on the phone at that time. What would you recommend being the next steps for the interviewee at that point?
Sure. I might do both, meaning connect them with try to contact them with two different methods. So one would be I would follow up with another phone call, leave a voicemail, and reiterate my interest in the position. If I could find their email or I had it, I would follow up with that as well, maybe a day or two later. But after a while, if somebody doesn't get back to me, I got to start to wonder one thing. Do I want to work for an employer who's making these appointments and then not following up? This goes back to the whole thing where they're not only interviewing you, you are interviewing them. So I don't think there's anything wrong with following up, because some people are really good on the phone. They enjoy the phone. Some people like email. That's why I suggest spreading it around, the method of contact. But if after a while you're not getting any contact, either phone or email, I would probably move on.
Thanks, Adam. A few more questions here.
Sure.
Do you have any good resources for locating human resources contact information if it's not on their website?
Well, LinkedIn will be one. Also, two, you can get really kind of clever and join the LinkedIn group HR Professionals. It's the premier, it'll say LinkedIn's HR group. There's tens of thousands of HR folks on there. And it's interesting because then you'll see what they're thinking. They talk about onboarding, like when you just get to that, start working with somebody, what is that like? They talk about cover letters. They talk about tons of stuff. So if you're on LinkedIn, I would look up in that search box on the left, the LinkedIn HR Professionals page, and then just follow it. It's not a closed group, and you will get access to a lot of inside information.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And do you think that it's critical to use your personal cell phone number as part of your contact information, or does email suffice?
I would do both, because again, some people are really, interested in the phone, some email. So give them every way, method to contact you. The thing with the cell phone, just make sure if you have an outgoing message that it's professional, and yeah, go from there.
Hey, Adam, I think that's it for the questions that we got in. So
Okay.
if you want to let people know how they can access this webinar after we finish up, that would be great.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Chrissy. So I thank you guys for attending today's webinar. Cover letters and thank you notes made simple. Today's webinar was recorded and will soon be archived on our website at montclair.edu/career-services. Once you leave today's webinar, you'll receive a survey on the presentation. Please provide your feedback as this will help us improve our services. And so thank you again for joining us today, and be sure to take advantage of career services at Montclair State, and have a great rest of the week.